Good to see y'all. I see some familiar faces, some unfamiliar faces, and hopefully those unfamiliar faces will become familiar faces over the course of time here. And so I'm basically, I'm going to talk to you about the trust. Hey, surprise, surprise, look who all from the trust is here. He's going to talk to you about the trust. And if you guys saw my presentation in November that was in here, or if you saw the one that I did remotely, there's going to be some overlap there, but there'll be some new things. And hopefully if you're like me, you forgot what you learned in November, and this will all be new to you again anyways. So let's start off with where we are. And this is a map of North Carolina and all the open and conserved lands in North Carolina. And Balsam Mountain Preserve is on there because we are part of the conserved lands of North Carolina. It's a little blip that's right over here, but I got a nice little "you are here" bobble there to show you where you are. So we're mixed into this green landscape of conserved lands that are in western North Carolina. And to put a little bit of a bigger point on it, here's an aerial photo that was taken of the preserve in 2000. So just as the property was bought from Champion Paper Company. And we are literally right there, right now. This is where the clubhouse is, so you can see Double Top here. This is, I believe this is Cashy Branch drainage here. This is Lake Log drainage there, and Dark Ridge is over the ridge there. So we can't see Sugarloaf drainage in that particular photograph. But the point is that when you look out into that landscape, all you see is green behind us, right? Because that's the Nantahala and the Blue Ridge Parkway, and so we're part of something, the conserved lands of western North Carolina. And you probably sensed that when you first drove onto the preserve, right? There's some reason why you all are all sitting in this room together. And for some of you, maybe the main reason might be golf, or maybe the main reason might be the community that's here. But for all of you, I think somewhere within the top 3, 4, I don't know, is going to be that it's a beautiful place, right? You're here because it's a beautiful place to live. And you're not alone in feeling that. There are over 140 different species of birds that call the preserve its home. And for reference, these numbers that are down here below are the numbers for the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. And I'm not going to obsess too much on this, they're just there for reference for you. We'll come back to them in just a second. 32 different species of herps. Herps are reptiles, amphibians, turtles. 32 different species of mammals. Cute little red squirrel. Sometimes you see people wearing those pins that say "Ask me about whatever it is that they're selling." Ask me about red squirrels. That's really, I got stories to tell. 717 species of trees, shrubs, herbs, etc. And then I separate mosses out because I think mosses are really cool. 161 different species of mosses, and we won't even go into fungi and all the other weird things across the face of the planet. And here's where the Great Smoky Mountain National Park returns back into the picture again, because we see ourselves right down here with this little red rhinoceros. I think the preserve boundary looks like a rhinoceros in silhouette. So here we are, 115 times smaller than the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. So there are no shames to be had in the amount of diversity that we have here. Because if we were 115 times bigger, we would have some very impressive numbers as well. So lots of critters like to live here for the very same reasons that we like to live here. And not only just critters, but some special critters, some rare critters. And so the North Carolina Natural Heritage Programs keeps a sort of a database of special natural heritage areas. And we have 3 within the boundaries of the preserve. One right here is when you are driving into the preserve. This is called Willett's Hornblende Slope. This is where you see all the trilliums in bloom when you're driving in every spring. We'll get back to that one because it's really cool. This is Lake Log Falls right here, a number of rare species there. And this is Cold Spring Gap, which is that if you went up Sweet Fern to the top, all the way to the top, that's Cold Springs Gap up there. It's in between Double Top and Sugarloaf. And so, but let's return to that Willett's Hornblende Slope, because here's the description back in the 1990s that a professor at Western Carolina wrote about Willett's Hornblende Slope. And he said, the species diversity is the greatest for this site of any similar-sized area in Jackson County, and perhaps will prove to be so for all terrestrial ecosystems in the Blue Ridge province of North Carolina. And that's right in our front yard. You know? So this is a special place. So it's not, you know, you intuited it when you came here and decided to call it your home, but biodiversity says so as well. And you know, I'd really like to show these maps that show these conserved lands. This is another map that shows the conserved lands, and we're just going to zoom in, particularly to our little area here, because here's our rhinoceros, okay, our green rhinoceros. We've got Banana Hill behind us. Across the road, there's mountains across the road. Those are the Plot Balsams, and then we've got the Great Smoky Mountain National Park north of that as well. But you can see there's kind of like a little trail connecting us to the Smokies. And what I like to emphasize is that, you'll hear me say this over and over again throughout my tenure here, is we are part of something bigger, okay? Because we're part of this matrix of conserved lands, and we need to think about what our role is within that matrix of conserved lands. And I will tell you that there are efforts afoot to make the connections between these conserved lands even greater. So more of a reason why we should be involved in that. So just, you know, keep that in mind. But, you know, if you go back to the beauty of working at the Balsam Mountain Trust is there's an incredible paper archive of the history of the preserve. Unfortunately, it's all paper. It's very hard to find. but if you go back and look at some of the original documentation centered around the preserve, they use this phrase, and you guys have probably heard this phrase before, community within a park, not a park within a community. And so, what is the park that we are sitting within? And here we see our rhinoceros ahead, appropriately in gray right now. And all of these clear spots or openings are where you live, potentially, or the golf course, or the common areas, the amenity. So what is that gray area? And that gray area is a conservation easement. And so a conservation easement is a voluntary legal agreement that permanently limits the use of the land in order to protect the conservation values while allowing the landowner to retain any private property rights. And so you can't say that you're like a community within a park unless you like provide some set of guarantees that that park is going to continue to exist. And so the conservation easements allow us to do that. Now, you're still a private property owner, somebody owns that property, and it's not the North American Land Trust, but the North American Land Trust controls the easement, okay? This is, I know, like a little bit inside baseball here, but I think it's important to understand when it comes to what the role is of the trust versus the role of the community association versus the role of whoever. The North American Land Trust is a land trust that controls the easements of properties throughout North America, mostly on the East Coast. And Balsam Mountain Preserve is one of those easements. So there's about 4,300-ish acres within our rhinoceros's head here. About 3,300 of those acres are within the conservation easement and can never be developed, okay? And that's controlled by the North American Land Trust, not the Balsam Mountain Trust. So where do we fit in? We're just a poor little possum with our head covered up. You know, where do we fit in if we're not like in control of this land trust? And now we get to go back in time to understand. And we're going to go back to the 1990s when a community down off the coast of South Carolina called Spring Island, which has a very similar logo to us historically, was going off with a very similar ethos and mentality of a community which was surrounded by lands, beautiful lands that we wanted to conserve. And so they've got, what, 3,000 acres of nature. They're paltry 1,800 acres are preserved compared to us. But the developers of Spring Island decided, hey, we should do the same thing up in the mountains. And that's when this property was bought from the Champion Paper Company, and that was the origins of the Balsam Mountain Preserve as a community. Now, let's step forward to October 2nd, 2000. Elaine Marshall, who is the Secretary of State of North Carolina, still is the Secretary of State of North Carolina. I like to imagine she was driving into work on this day listening to the #1 song on the radio, Madonna's music. You know, she was just like jamming along, bobbing her head along. Little did she know, as she was going to get into work, that she was going to sign the Articles of Incorporation for the Balsam Mountain Trust. So this is our birthday, October 2nd, 2020. So October 2nd, 2025 will be our 25th anniversary. Do you think we should do something special?
Yeah!
And so a few months later, the trust hired their first executive director, and it was a woman named Sherry Patillo, the sister of Dan Patillo, who is the botanist who did all of those surveys that I was referring to earlier. And Sherry was the first executive director of the trust, and really at that time, you know, they were developing a community, but what they really wanted to make sure that they nailed down was that conservation easement stuff. It was all about nailing down that conservation easement. In order to do that, they had to do a whole bunch of different types of studies, and I won't go into the details, but just know in those early years, there was a lot of research that was happening on the preserve, trying to document the diversity, sort of trying to justify its significance as a conserved area. So that happened, and then really to get inside baseball, December 18th, 2001, we became a nonprofit. So the Balsam Mountain Trust is a private 501c3. We exist solely through the donations of people like you in this room. We don't get funding from the club. We don't get funding from the community association. We are our own sort of independent organization nested within the Balsam Mountain Preserve. That has varied a little bit over time, and people who were far more involved with it than me can get into things that had to do with real estate transfers that then became not considered legal to do. But so we became a 501c3. Oh, excuse me, I got off track. December 18th, 2001 was when the conservation easement was created. Sorry, my bad. It was entered into the Jackson County deed. And then it was April 18th, 2002 that we became a 501c3. And so there was all this amazing research that was being done, some permanent plots that were established to look at the vegetation, really great historic data. Sherry was really involved with trying to be part of something bigger and getting out within the community and talking at groups like the conservation easements and other land preservation techniques, measuring and mitigating human impacts in the Southern Appalachians, was really sort of out there in the community kind of talking about what an amazing thing the preserve was doing. And then in December 30th, 2002, the board gave her enough money to be able to hire our first naturalist, our first senior naturalist, and this is when Michael Skinner was hired. It was a few years later that Sherry moved on to other things in life, and Michael Skinner became our executive director in 2005 until October of last year. And somebody told me this looks too much like an in memoriam thing. Michael is still alive. He, in fact, will be giving a trust talk later in August. So he's out traveling right now somewhere, but he'll be back in mid-July. But so I would say Michael, like, you know, Sherry did this table setting in terms of getting the easement started, and then Michael was the one who came in and said, okay, like now let's see how the trust operates as a community builder and educator and organizer sort of thing. So I would say this was the beginning of sort of the rocket ship of programmatic outreach and education in particular. And so just some familiar faces for those of you who've been around for a while. Blair Ogburn, who I met in the middle of Alarka, like on the trail. If anybody knows where Alarka is, it was in the middle of nowhere. And I said, I think I know you. She said, I think I know you. That's the first time we ever met. I just had seen pictures of her. It was cool. Lovely person, and enjoys a very big margarita, apparently. But the trust was, doing what the trust does. It was leading hikes. This is the beginning of sort of the trust acting as an animal ambassador role within the community. was titillating kids to no end. I love this picture. That kid couldn't be any cuter. You know, really involving the arts and culture of nature within what we do. Summer camps for all the grandkids and things like that. Trust talks like we sit here now. And then at some point the AmeriCorps entered into the picture and we started the Adopt a School program, started getting out within particularly in the 4th and 5th grade levels. Had some really amazing, love and respect these women, I barely know them, but really amazing education directors. And, you know, you guys did a lot of work too, you know, and really sort of, pulled wallpaper, painted, and created this very lovely nature center that sits nestled within the center of this community. And meanwhile, all this programmatic rocket ship is taking off. There's also some research that's happening too. Sonny Himes, who some of you may know, who was on property today working on something that we'll get to in just a second, between 2003 and 2007, moved 7,400 plants that were inside the building envelope of either people's homes or the golf course or whatever, and tried to transplant them somewhere else so that they would survive. These were rare plants that she was trying to move to help save them. We're going to come back to that because there's something cool. And then also in 2008, and then again in 2017, this isn't awesome, some invasive species surveys as well, not just doing the surveys, but also doing the treatment as well. Dr. Peter Bates, who used to be on the board of the Trust, was involved with a lot of forestry studies, understanding what was going on with the forests. Amy Rockhill very recently did a camera trapping study. Lots of research was happening over the course of this time as well. So lots of cool things. So where do we fit in? Where do we all fit in there? Well, we do all of those things, right? Everything that I just described to you that has been done, that's where the Trust fits in. It's about community work, it's about community education, it's about research, it's about land stewardship, it's about getting into the external community. But I would say an underrated way, or maybe a little less known way that we fit in, is with the North American Land Trust. And our annual report, which I'm going to refer to in just a minute, has a quote from Will Gandy, who sits on our board, and he's with the North American Land Trust. And he talks about the role between the North American Land Trust and Balsam. And it's really like we are partners, right? We are the Balsam Mountain Trust are the eyes and ears that are on the ground for the North American Land Trust to help them and guide them in things that have to do with the conservation easement. So that's one, maybe underrated place where we lived in. And if you saw the e-news that I sent out, I promised cat pictures. So here we are at the present. You guys hired this weirdo and his cat, Willow, in 2023. And we've got an incredible staff right now of folks going on. A lot of familiar faces there. Rachel, who's with us. Amy, brand new. Then we got Emily, who's our AmeriCorps member down here in the bottom left, and Gina, who's our summer camp counselor, and I'm going to come back and say a little bit more about Gina in just a second, but really have a good, solid group of people who are doing all the things that we used to do. We're going out and hiking on trails inside the community and outside the community, having what I think are some pretty cool and clever events at the Nature Center, out there doing festivals in Silva, greening up the mountain. Been doing trivia down at Innovation Station in Dillsboro. I love this picture because of this. See these two young kids? See this woman right here? She wasn't quite as young as them. But that connection, that sort of intergenerational connection is something that I really strive for, and this was a cool event to see that happening. We also have an animal care intern this summer. This is Meredith, and I just want to emphasize the importance of bringing in new energy and things like that. Meredith said, what are the animals in the enclosures doing at night? We were just hanging out, I guess. So Meredith said, well, why don't we put a wildlife camera in there? And so she put a wildlife camera in there and found Tilia was being really active, but seemed to be doing this sort of ritualized movement, which generally when you see that in animals that are in enclosures, it's a sign of stress of some kind. And so she is now developing an enrichment plan for Tilia that includes potentially a giant cat wheel. We'll see if it happens. but you know, it was because she just sort of came with this sort of interesting and unique idea. It's like bumping up our game, and this is like the important thing of doing things like internships, and we're helping those kids out, but they're 100% helping us out. So. I've been trying to get out and follow up on some studies that were done in the early 90s about rare plant species and going back and checking on those populations. They were there in the 1990s. Are they there now? For the most part, yes. So it's a good thing, but we're sharing that information with the North Carolina Natural Heritage Program. We're continuing some of the things that we've always done in terms of treating hemlocks against the hemlock woolly adelgid, working with hemlock healers to do that. Another thing that was done way back in the day from 2001 to 2006 were breeding bird surveys by a guy named Don Hendershot. Don came back in 2023, and this was his quote. He said that he's been out here all this year, and it sounds like the birds of the preserve are doing really awesome. And in fact, one species that you might be familiar with, and if you're not, get your Merlin app and start listening for it, is the wood thrush. Wood thrushes used to be rarer on the preserve than I think the most they ever. So I think he had 64 different sites that he went to. The most number of places that they heard wood thrushes at was 8 in all those previous years, 2001 through 2006. This year he heard it at 20 different sites. And a wood thrush is an interior forest bird, so that says good things about the quality of the habitat of our interior forest. So that's really cool. Mm-hmm. Now remember all of these plants that Sunny relocated? We're going to do an Oprah Where Are They Now project. And so Sunny, that's what Sunny has been out here the last few days, is going back and revisiting some of these plants and trying to see what the status of those are. And it's like, yeah, that's cool. But this is actually really useful information when you think about it, right? Because there's other communities that are being built throughout all the Southern Appalachians, and there's an opportunity for them to sort of repeat our successes or don't repeat our failures. But we have to know what our successes and our failures are in order to transmit that information. So this can be one of the cool positive outcomes of that, I think. And then also, since it's been since 2017 that we've looked at invasive species, we're taking another swing at that. And so you'll be seeing Sunny and some students going around and starting that. And I just want to emphasize, Sunny's also doing a workshop. It's going to be on the 13th of this month. It is a bit of an all-day workshop. It's part in the morning and then part in the afternoon. You don't necessarily have to do the part in the afternoon. The morning's the book learning, the afternoon's the field learning. But I invite you to come to that. We will be, Amy and I and the rest of the team are going to be working on trying to get you all to be the eyes and ears for us in terms of being able to find these things, because you're on the trails more than we can possibly be. Yes?
Whatever, Sunny is great. I've worked with her when she did the invasive species survey 5 years ago. I encourage everybody to come to it. You will enjoy it, and you'll learn a lot.
Yeah, and Sunny's I don't think there's a person who can germinate seeds better than Sunny. She runs a nursery called Joe Pye Nursery, which some of you all might have gotten. Some of your native
definitely did.
might have been from
Yeah.
Joe Pye Nursery.
Yeah.
Another thing that I feel sort of particularly proud of is that we've really started to work closely with WATER, which is the Watershed Association of the Tuckasegee River. The Tuckasegee River is all this blue part here. This sort of brownish part right here is Scotts Creek watershed, which is nested within the Tuckasegee watershed. And there's our rhinoceros. We're a big chunk of it. And we're the headwaters for, a good chunk of the water that's coming out there. So the things that we do on the preserve are clearly affecting people downstream. And we're doing, I think, really good things on the preserve in order to help maintain the quality of the entire river. So we're now doing we're joining together with WATER to do water testing, a few too many waters. But it's gratifying to sort of get involved and find partnerships with these other external organizations that have adjacent missions to our own. And then I don't have a picture exactly of Ricardo Navarro, who's going to be our research intern that starts on this coming Monday. So he gets to be a black snake. But Ricardo's a student at Western North Carolina who's going to be joining us for the rest of the summer, working on some research projects of various sorts. So helping me and Amy do some invasive species surveys, some rare plant surveys, a variety of different things. And, you know, just, again, I truly believe in the sort of the power of collaboration. And so I really have been trying to go out there and meet, and these are just some of the organizations that we've started to establish, I think, a fairly positive relationship with, and are talking about the ways in which we can collaborate with one another. Because it's that you be part of something bigger, we're part of something bigger, right? Part of being part of something bigger is working together with all the other players, and sometimes being a leader and sometimes being a follower. And so you can learn about all of that and more in the annual report, which is now posted on our website. If you go into our website and go under publications, annual reports, you can see a copy of the annual report and see some of the deets on that. But now let's blast off into the future. We looked at the past, we looked at the present, let's move on into the future here. And so here we see some things aren't going to change. Amy hopefully is going to be with us forever into the future. Rachel's hopefully forever going to be with us in the future. But one thing is going to change. Our AmeriCorps members, they can only do a 2-year stint. And we're fortunate because so many of our AmeriCorps members do a 2-year stint because they don't have to. They can only just do one. But Emily's at the end of hers at the end of July. But, drum roll, come on, seriously. Our next AmeriCorps member is going to be Gina, who's our summer camp now. And if you've been out with Gina, like, we scored huge on that one, man. She is amazing. Yes, please, Kathy, testify.
Testimonial. I went zip lining with Gina the other day over to the Nantahala Gorge. We had so much fun.
And that was adult camp, wasn't it?
It was an adult camp, and I highly recommend those adult camps.
We have another one July 28th.
July 28th is the next one. We get to go whitewater rafting. But Gina is so excited to be here, and I think she's got all these great ideas for kids camps. She's going to be an awesome addition to this place.
Yeah.
So that's my testimonial.
Yeah. With the talent that we have amassed is amazing. I feel it's just a privilege to work with people and work with. So when the board, hired me on, they talked to me about sort of a little bit of like bringing balance back to the forest. Not that the forest was really totally out of whack, but that there was the land stewardship and the research, I think particularly through COVID, it kind of like, taken a hit. A lot of it, there was also changes in developers. All these things created complications for that part of the mission. And so it's really my sort of duty and from the board to really try to reignite research and land stewardship, and then obviously not ignoring the great strengths that we've already built in education. But we're also going through a strategic planning process where we can like sort of look at all of this, and there's going to be an opportunity for you to give us a little feedback at the end of this if you want to as part of that process. But this is sort of my Venn diagram of what I want to create, at least build a fun and respectful work culture where we take good care of the animals, because if we can't do that, then we can't do the rest of that. So that's the big circle that we're all nested within. And then, trying to find those sweet spots. Otherwise, like, where are the areas of overlap? How can we engage external audience and reignite land stewardship? How can we hit that magic spot in the middle? And not everything has to land in the middle. Not everything has to land in area overlap. But it's just a fun way to think about it as we're developing programs and the different activities that we do. And do we have some activities for you? If you haven't seen, in the month of July, we've got a lot going on. August is going to be equally as fun and filled with stuff. I do want to bring up that on August 21st from 1 to 3 p.m., the Nature Center is going to have an open house. So feel free to come to that. It's an opportunity to see all the staff and the critters and all the things that are happening there. And then you can come up here and do the balsam. Isn't that on the 21st?
Yep.
Tell us what it is, Linda.
Right here.
Oh, the social good hour.
It's the social good hour. is on the 21st. So come and hang out with the trust for a little, and then come here and do a little bit of social good with the wonderful work that group's doing. And so I can see a preview of what slide's next, and I can't remember what. I remember. I couldn't remember, why did I include this? And this is because I just want to give you some things to think about, okay? So I'm just going to look for a future, because the future is undefined, right? It's up for us to define the future. So here's some things that I want you to think about. There we go, that's the reason why I did that. So, we do this. This is our adopted school. This is a 4th grade class, Clyde Elementary, that I went out to with Emily. We're doing great work. We do the 5th grades with field days. We're hitting that age group pretty good. We're in the zone there, kind of thing. But then what I want you to think about is, what about their older siblings and what about their parents? Okay, so is there a role for the trust there? And if so, what is that? What would it take for us to be able to fill that role? Because everything comes with, it requires energy and capacity and stuff like that. The community science, one of the things in diversity surveys and monitoring of indicators, this is some stuff that you're going to start seeing us experimenting with. This is stuff that Amy and I are going to start experimenting with and trying to get you all involved with at some level. And just seeing how it works. But the idea here is, and I didn't include this slide. There's this idea of skim, swim, and dive. People talk about it when they're absorbing content. If you're going to a website, if you're a skimmer, you just you read the headlines and then you're on to the next thing. Or you might dive, you might swim within that website article, or you might dive down a rabbit hole, right? And then never come back. You're now 5 articles deep in a Wikipedia thread, kind of thing. And we can think of the way in which we're involved with the trust in that same way. We skim the surface. We might just come to trust talks, and that's cool. But we might swim, we might get a little bit more involved and do some things, or we might dive and become really involved in things. And what we want to try to provide to you as a community are ways to, and that's going back to this slide here, of ways in which you can kind of become involved with sort of monitoring the health of the preserve. And so we're going to be experimenting with that, trying some ways in which you might skim the surface of that, some ways you might swim with us, and some ways you might take a deep dive. But I encourage you to, come to us with ideas. We're not we have some ideas. We got silly ideas mostly, but encourage you to come to with ideas. And I'm a big believer in this casual community science, is what I would refer to it as. But you notice in parentheses that it makes a difference. And why is this gate here? It's because we don't want to be gatekeepers to science. Science isn't something that only PhDs can do. You can become involved in science. And casual community science is a way to do so. And so just projects that are as simple as going out and taking your phone and taking a picture of stuff. And so later in July, if you'd like to, July 22nd through the 30th is going to be National Moth Week. And we are going to be doing some black lighting here on the preserve. And we're encouraging people to just take pictures of moths and post them to iNaturalist. That's all you got to do. You don't have to try to ID it or anything like that. And you can get badges if you do it. It's so gamified. But the reason why I bring this up is because this is Jackson, this is Haywood, this is Buncombe County, and this is a number of species of moths that are known from each one of those counties. I think there's something wrong here, right? Jackson's definitely got way more species of moths. So we call this a sampling bias, right? So let's unbias that sample, okay? We can do that. But if moths aren't your bag, but you'd like to get into birds, there's the North Carolina Bird Atlas, which Amy and I have been talking about ways in which to sort of develop a little birding community here on the preserve. And I just want to note that all of these black squares are what are considered to be priority by the Department of Wildlife Resources, and we are within one of those priority squares, so being involved is really going to be particularly helpful. And then I just want to come back around again to this we are part of something bigger thing before I close out. We are nestled within this, this ecosystem of other organizations, other conserved lands, all these other, what I would call adjacent nonprofits that are doing similar things to us. And a lot of them are, I mean, the trust is tiny, compared to the North Carolina Arboretum, or something like that. But there are also some that are even tinier than the trust, right, that are out there. And something that I've been thinking about that I would like for you all to think about as well is this idea of sort of collective impact, right? Because you've got all these organizations that are doing adjacent work, but they're all going, they might be rowing in the somewhat same vector, but they're not really working together necessarily. And the idea of collective impact is developing that common agenda, common vision, and then doing, working together to try to move forward while maintaining independence. It's not like taking over or anything like that. Everybody's still doing their own jam, right? But we're all trying to move in the same direction. And I think this region of Western North Carolina has the strong potential for collective impact. Maybe these efforts are already underway. If so, somebody let me know so the trust can become more involved in it. If it's not already underway, then I think that's a potential role that the trust could play in helping the region while not necessarily